Hi, and welcome to episode 4 of Make It Mondays. I'm so glad you can join us. Today's episode is inspired by the holiday Shavuot, and we'll be making a miniature encaustic photo painting. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about photo encaustics, basically what it looks like is something like this. It's where we take a photograph and we adhere it to some kind of substrate. This is a wooden panel, actually a wooden frame you can hang up. Then beeswax is poured all on top of it, and you can create different effects by adding some texture with stenciling. You can sort of use different tools to create effects and markings in your wax, and you can paint underneath and on top of it. So we're going to be making something like this, not exactly this, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited to get to work. So thanks again for joining me, and I hope you enjoy photo encaustic painting. So in addition to placing flowers and greens around your house to decorate for Shavuot, we are going to create a miniature photo encaustic painting. I want to go over our first step for this project, and that is to choose the image that we're going to work with. I'm sure many of you have snapped a picture of the beautiful flowers that are awakening in the fresh spring air. I know I have, especially on Mother's Day when I took my mom to the gardens at Swarthmore to take a walk. We saw so many beautiful flowers, and I took some pictures, and that's what I'm going to use to create my image for the encaustic photo painting. So as you can see, here's a picture of a bulb. We're going to keep going here. So we have this flower, we have these beautiful yellow flowers. I'm just gonna go through until I find something that really speaks to me. I kind of like that. Let's see if there's anything we like more, but this could work. I think that one's really nice. How about we go with this one? So I'm using a Mac laptop, and we have this program called Photos. So all I have to do to export this is go to File, Export, and then I'm going to export it as a JPEG on high at its full size. And then it just asks me where I want to save it. I'm going to choose Desktop. And here's our image. Now, I have a program called Photoshop, which is a subscription-based photo editing program for professionals. You can actually sign up for a free trial for Photoshop if you want to learn to use it, and I am going to show you how to edit this photo through this program. Or you can take all of the lessons from this episode and sort of apply them to any photo editing program that you're using. So I'm going to open Photoshop. As you can see, I have some imagery from our other web series on GPJFF. So I'm going to open our image. Here's our image. So the first thing we have to do is we have to crop this image so that it fits this 5x5 block of wood, because this is what we're going to adhere our image onto. Now because our block of wood is 5 by 5, we want to change the size of this to 5 by 7. And the reason why is because we're going to crop the 5 by 5 out of the 5 by 7. And this gives us the most amount of room to work with. I go to image size. And as you can see, my image is now 5 by 6.6, which is, close to 7 at the 300 DPI ratio. And I press OK. And then I go to right here where it says style. I change this to fixed size, and I just put in 5 by 5. And what that does is when I click on the image, it creates a 5 by 5 area where now I can choose how I'm gonna crop my image. I really like where the petals are centered, so I'm just going to see how this looks, and then I'm going to go up to image again and press crop. All right. If you're 100% happy with your image, you can go to File, Save As, and save this file onto your desktop, name it, and then you can actually just send this file to any commercial printer and they'll send you a copy of your image. They'll ask you what paper you would like, and for the purpose of this project, you would say matte paper. You don't want to use any coated shiny paper. You just want to choose plain old matte paper. And they would put it on a really nice photo paper, high quality, and send it back to you. Now, if you do have a printer at home, instead of going to Save As right now, you can actually print this yourself. And what you want to do is just make sure it's exactly the way you want it. We can do this by going to Image Adjustments and Brightness and Contrast. So brightness and contrast is a really easy way to just control the contrast of your image. So as you can see, when I pull this lever up, it makes the image a lot more contrasty, and when I pull it down, it makes it a lot more flat. So this is where it was in the middle at 0, and I think I just want to move it up just a tiny bit. I like the shadows that it creates when there's a little bit more contrast. And then here for the brightness, I could change, do I want it to be more bright? That brings out the whites, or do I want it to go darker? And of course this creates, you get a lot more of the saturation on the petals of the flowers. So I actually like it where it was. I think that if anything, maybe 5% higher, and then hit OK. Now, there's lots of other adjustments you can make. You could achieve the same effect by going to levels, where you play with the midtones, the highlights, and the shadows, much in the same way. So here I'm playing with the shadows, and as you can see, it's adding some contrast. Here I'm playing with the midtones, and it's right now changing the saturation of my color in those petals. And here I'm playing with the highlights, and that's bringing out the whites in the image. So it's up to you how you want to achieve the look that you want for your image. I'm gonna go with this and press OK. The last thing that I want to do to this image is just sharpen it a tiny bit. It's going to lose a lot of sharpness once we add the encaustic wax. We're going to be using beeswax. So we want it as sharp as possible to begin with. I'm going to go to Filter and Sharpen and Unsharp Mask. There's a lot of choices here, but Unsharp Mask is the best to use. And then I always go with this formula that I just found out was the best for the way I want to edit my photos. What I've come to decide was the best for my images is putting the amount at about 100. the radius at 1.3 and the threshold at 3 or 4. So that just takes the sharpness up a notch. So at this point, I'm really happy with my image, so I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Image for Photo Encaustic. So what I did was I doubled my image on the page because we're working with an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and to just put one little 5 by 5 square would be wasting half of the sheet. So I just copied and pasted my layer. As you can see, I have layer 1, layer 2, and now I can have an extra image just in case I mess up something, maybe when I'm adhering it to the wooden substrate. I'm just going to go to File, Print. Make sure all my settings are okay. We have the right printer chosen, Photoshop managing colors. We have the correct profile of our paper chosen. And now we are going to hit, actually I just want to make sure my quality is okay here. Okay, we're gonna hit print. All right. So before we cut out our image and we adhere it to our board, I just like to show you some of the materials that we'll be using. So we have our 5 by 5 wooden panel. We have our PVA glue that we're going to use to adhere our image to the board. We have this beeswax. This is the brand Encausticos, and you can order this online straight from the company or an art store. This is bleached beeswax, and what bleached beeswax does is it creates much more of a clear coating over your photo, and that allows more of the photo to be seen. We also have an assortment of brushes. We have one that we'll be using for glue, and then one where we'll actually be using for the encaustic part of the process. We have an X-Acto knife, a ruler, a pot here that we're going to pour our beeswax into, and then we have one of these baking pans where all the excess beeswax will fall into, and then this little, you know, sort of something to elevate our image so that it's not gonna get stuck to our baking pan. And then here is where we'll be cooking our encaustic beeswax, and this is just a hot plate, and I have it over here so that I can have it plugged in. Okay, so our first step is to take our image, place it on our mat board, and we're going to cut it out with our ruler and X-Acto knife. Now, because I set it up this way, I'm gonna have to put it on this line on the matte paper so I know what I'm doing, because otherwise the shadows make it hard to see where I'm supposed to be cutting. Okay, so now we have two images, one if everything goes perfect, and two if we mess up and have to start over. So now we can just see how that looks on our board, and it looks pretty good. Yeah, I think that should do. Let's see if this one looks better. Okay, definitely like this one. Okay, So I got a scrap piece of paper, and now I'm just going to use this spongy brush to coat the back of my image with the PVA glue. And you want to just start from the center and push out towards the edges with the glue. Alright. Now, it's actually what I'm gonna do is just wash my hands really quick. So now we're going to take our image, and we have our glue, and we're gonna just press it down gently on our substrate. Now, fortunately, the PVA is a tiny bit forgiving, not a whole lot, but if you need to sort of move or reposition where you're going, it does allow you to do that. Adhered my image to the substrate. Now, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Pretty much to the edge. I did get a little thumbprint here. Oh, the cat has decided to join us. I'm sure that you can't see the cat in the video, but the cat is behind me. Prince is going to participate. Okay, so as I said, it's not perfect. There's a thumbprint, but we're gonna go with it. It's all right. I am going to just add a tiny bit of glue to this corner that keeps coming up, and then we're gonna continue. All right, so here we have it. We have our image glued to our frame. Okay. So now we are going to pour our beeswax into this pot and cook it up and melt it. Now, my hot pot is right over here, so I'm gonna have to reposition the camera, so give me a second for that. So as you can see, we now have our pot of our beeswax, our bleached beeswax. We have that on our hot plate, and I have it set just to 250 degrees so I can speed up the process just a tiny bit. And once our bleached beeswax is melted, then we're going to go to the next step. So now our bleached beeswax has melted, and what I'm going to do is just pour it down the center of this image, and then once I get all the wax on top of it, I'm going to quickly pick up this pan and just tilt it into the corners that the wax hasn't gotten to yet. This is just to even out the way the wax is distributed over my image. So ready? Here is the moment of truth. Now, I actually think it got most of the image, to be honest. Now, we'll just wait for this to dry a little bit, and then we'll see what we need to do to get this image where we want it to be. So I brought some more tools down for us to use. Now at this point, our wax has pretty much dried enough where we can move on to the next step. And what I brought here is just a razor blade that I'm going to use to try to even my wax out over my image. And so you use this tool very, very lightly. You sort of just See, I don't know if you can see that, but we have just little thin layers of wax coming off of our image. I'm having some technical difficulties, so I had to turn the lights off on the camera. So excuse me if this is a little bit dark, but hopefully you can still see. So I'm taking this razor blade, and what I'm doing is just very lightly maneuvering it over my image until I very evenly and gently have gotten the wax to a flat enough state where you can see more of the image, but it still retains that shiny, waxy surface. Now there's a bit more wax on this side, so I'm going to stay in this area until I even it out. And then I'm just gonna remove the wax and just place it in a little pile on the table. Now I really love working with encaustics because it's a lot of fun to play around with my image and be able to not just add on, but subtract to create, you know, the effects that I want. It's kind of like when you're putting on makeup, and for those of you who, you know, don't put on makeup, you won't know what I'm talking about, but when you're putting on makeup and you got way too much, you know, in places where the makeup just shouldn't have gone, and you have to subtract the makeup to create the look you want. Well, this is really the same thing. Now, once we have it to a level where all the wax is as even as it's gonna be, at that point, I'm going to apply a heat gun to my image just so that I can get all these little lumps and bumps out of the wax coating. That's gonna melt those lumps and bumps away. Now, if you want the lumps and bumps, you don't have to apply heat. You can just go with all the little scratchy surface marks that you're getting with the blade. And I think that is coming along really nice. I actually really like how it looks. If you get all of these materials and you enjoy making this, you can make, you know, so many more blocks like this and just have a whole entire wall of just gorgeous flowers, you know, these little squares all over your wall. And they're just, you know, photos you took with your iPhone when you were walking outside and you were inspired by the beautiful flowers you saw. So this is really a really nice way to decorate for Shavuot. So now we're ready for the last step, which is just using the heat gun. And again, you don't need this, you don't really need to use the heat gun. I'm just using it to smooth out my image. So I will be right back. I'm gonna go grab that. So I plugged in our heat gun. And now I'm just going to hold this up, and you have to be very careful not to get your hands burnt. So you kind of just want to hide them under your image. And soon you're going to see that this is getting shinier and shinier, and that's basically the heat gun just taking out the texture of the wax. What the heat gun did, it did take out our texture, but it also kind of added more of the cloudy surface that, you know, we just tried to eliminate so we could see more of our image. So we could either leave it like this, or we can just try to get it to a point where we can see more of our image. In that case, you'll probably have to sort of live with some of the texture, because it looks like, at least with the heat gun I have, that it's impossible to do both. I'm going to try to get a little bit of this off just so we can get it to that place where we can see more of our image again. I am going to try to do this more on an angle. Now you can see the lines when I'm doing this forming into the wax. So what I think I'm gonna do is just go the exact opposite way and see if I can eliminate the lines that way. Now sometimes with this process you can go a little crazy and you're trying to get it perfect the way you want it, but you end up kind of going too far, and messing it up a little bit. So the best thing to do is kind of quit while you're ahead with this process. Don't try to be perfect. Just when you feel like it's close to what your ideal image would be, that's the best time to quit, because otherwise you might go way too far into the process and kind of do the opposite of what you want. Now the other thing that the heat does is seal your image. So if you're working in layers, like if you plan to paint on top of this or add texture, what the heat gun would do is seal that layer you're working on, and then once that dries, you can continue adding or detracting from your image. Now, if you do want to go, like if you like the look of distressed images, then you could kind of scrape until some of your image actually comes off, and that's how you would create that look. But I have to say, I'm getting to the point where I might actually be happy with the image and not want to mess with it further. Okay, so here we are, and I think our image looks really nice. I think it's gonna look great on the wall, and I'm definitely inspired to create more of these so that I have a beautiful Shavuot display. All right, here it is. This is what we created, and I think it's gonna look really beautiful on the wall, for instance, if you just want to. See? And can you imagine like maybe 6 or 7 more of these, and you can create your own Shavuot display. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed your lesson in how to create a miniature photo encaustic painting, and I hope you tune in next time. Thank you so much, and enjoy your holiday.